guys. Welcome to Big Sky, Montana. Sub-zero outside. In fact, last night, not tonight, which is sort of still happening. Yesterday night was -9, which I think is 2 degrees colder than basically the coldest sort of temperatures that I remember having endured. Of course, it's nice having snow. It's kind of a fairy tale scenario when that's the case. And Yellowstone has never been more beautiful, certainly in terms of the snow. Of course, what is beautiful to us, and as you know, for a photographer, is a totally different ball game if you're an animal. And so you saw things in Yellowstone yesterday, such as the bison. So where the road has been sort of cleared, there's this little fringe of turf. And so the bison are already getting onto the road to sort of chew that little bit of, um, you know, uh, threads of grass and so on that's there. I'm going to show you guys a couple of photos from yesterday, just like a handful. This is not going to be a very long live. The reason I'm doing it so early is, um, I'm probably going to be having breakfast with Lisa. And so the idea is to kind of get this done before that so that we can kind of get on with our day and get on with what we want to do. I'm in Big Sky, Montana. Sharon, good to see you. Big Sky's about an hour's drive from Bozeman, which is where you fly into from Denver. It's a beautiful airport. One of the things that surprises you when you get there are the big T-Rex skulls. And we actually went to a dinosaur museum after Yellowstone, which is pretty incredible as well. I'll show you guys more about that soon enough. Chelsea, good to see you. Good morning. What else can I tell you? Yeah, it's very cold. This is sort of a area where a lot of people ski. I don't know if you like my shirt that I bought yesterday, but people ski here. I'm someone who loves skiing. Um, Unfortunately, with my bone bruise in my knee, it's just too much of a risk to do that. I would love to ski. I've skied in Austria. I've skied in South Africa. I've skied in South Korea. I've also skied in Germany. So, yeah, it's definitely not nice missing out on that, but there's so much else to do and see. And so that's what I've been doing. By the way, this was a kind of a souvenir given to us by the tour guide. We sort of went on safari and we each got one of these. Okay, so without further ado, Yvonne, good to see you. 4:54 a.m. You are up early. Without any further ado, let's have a look at a couple of photos, just a few. That is the view from the aircraft approaching Montana. And as you can see, it looks like it's the Arctic, doesn't it? Just snow as far as you can see. And that is definitely something I'm not used to as a South African. We do get snow, but not much and not often. When we do get snow, it tends to last, not very long. The heat burns it up, and it's also a dry climate. So this is more snow than I think, besides in Austria, and besides when I've gone skiing in other countries, most snow I've ever seen. Apparently, it's been one of the best seasons for. It's been a very good season this year for skiing and that sort of thing. Loris, good to see you as well. Good morning. So I just find that incredible that you can be sitting in a chair drinking Sauvignon Blanc, white wine, and meanwhile you are thousands of feet in the air. I've always just found that an extraordinary thing. So that is the view of. Actually, I'm not even sure what the name is of that river. Can any of you help me? But it's the river that hugs the highway all the way from Bozeman to almost all the way from Bozeman to Big Sky, and that's actually where they filmed A River Runs Through It. It is very scenic. It is, and the art as you drive, you see trout fishermen all along the route. Okay. Okay, so this is the hotel that I'm staying at. It's actually called the Wilson Hotel. I don't know if you can see there. Wilson. And of course, Lisa's here and not actually staying in this hotel. She's staying in another hotel a little bit higher up the mountain, much grander than this one. But it's quite ironic. I'm here to meet Lisa, and it's Lisa Wilson, and I'm staying in the Wilson Hotel. And Wilson is all over the place. There are roads, Wilson Avenue, and anyway, so it's kind of interesting. That's just kind of the inside of the hotel. That's the view kind of over my shoulder. Like right now, there's that sort of fairy lit with little things going on. That's just sort of the interior, different view. And that's one of the first things I saw, just the simplicity in the snowscape that translates to art. And that's, of course, what we're going to talk about. Sharon says the Blackfoot River. Yvonne says the Gallatin. I think it might be the Gallatin. I'm not sure. Do I have a map here? I think I do have a map somewhere here. Anyway, I'll make sure. There's also the Yellowstone River. I'm not actually sure what river this is, but this is on the way to Yellowstone. I asked our driver if we could just stop alongside, and that always reminds me of cowboy movies. Rivers that are shallow enough in many places to cross, and obviously the pine trees and that sort of rugged setting. This is Lisa taking some of the first shots of bison. This is approaching Yellowstone. We're still not quite there, but you start seeing bison along the road. Ted Turner's ranch is in this area as well, and he obviously farms with bison as well. I actually had bison meat for dinner last night. It's similar to to beef. It's maybe it's almost got a slightly fattier taste, but yeah, it was a good meal. So that's kind of how I've been dressing. It's very cold here, so I've had to pack some of my warmest winter gear, and it has definitely been. Yesterday was very, very cold in the day, but also very bright and beautiful. There's the partners in crime. The driver actually said we hired a safari dude to show us around, and he said he really enjoyed being with us, and he said it's nice being with people who laugh so much, and so that gives you an idea of what the day was like. Just relaxing, enjoying the countryside, and making the most of it. So that's the sign when you sort of exit Yellowstone. That I think is called Roosevelt's Arch, or is it something else? It's named after some other president. So I wasn't paying that much attention. Anyway, that's quite a historic arch. And I actually wanted Lisa to lie next to me in the snow with her so her head would be upside down facing the other way, but it was a little bit, when you step into the snow, you sort of fall through it. That's actually snow behind me. So you can see, as far as the eye can see, it's just snow, right? And so that's kind of what we would do. We'd stop at the roadside, take out, I'm not sure what you call that. Is it a monoscope? It's a binocular thing with one lens. I'm not sure if one would call that a telescope, but it did really zoom into the landscape. So we did actually see wolves. We did see a bear in its lair. I got quite a nice glimpse of its eyes and face just for a moment. It was sort of lying in its den, and then just had its head sort of lolling out, sort of getting ready to come out. We saw a moose. We saw obviously lots of bison, elk, a kind of wild sheep that's got sort of big horns. Yeah, so we actually saw quite a lot. Again, you can see the landscape. It's just snow, and it's kind of springtime, starting to be springtime here in America. So the snow is going to start melting. So that's the scene where we were looking at the bears, or the bear, sort of down there. So that is what we were looking at down there. What this is over here in this image is that this is a huge rock, and you can see other big boulders in the background here that have also been deposited by glaciers. So that's how they got there. You can see it's right in the middle of the landscape. They didn't roll down a mountain. They dotted all over this landscape. And here's a particularly big one. So, yeah, it just gives you an idea of what's going on here. By the way, these are jet trails of airlines or airplanes, and I was in one of them. So that scene you saw, we did fly basically over Yellowstone. Maybe not directly over it, but it's the same kind of landscape. So yeah, I'm not going to take it really any further than that in terms of the sights and sounds. I'll obviously put together a little, little movie just dealing with our day. I don't really have time to do that now. I might do it tomorrow or something. Etienne Kowalinsky, nice to see you here. Bridget, good to see you as well. Yeah, so we were quite lucky to see, because the bears are kind of hibernating. We were lucky to actually catch a glimpse of a bear. Okay, so I'm just going to spend maybe half an hour going through a couple of letters, and we'll see how it goes. Have you guys voted in the poll? See, almost 70% said all of the above. So the point is, Van Gogh is starting to struggle at this point. He's it's kind of he's reached the end of, not the end of summer, but he's past the peak of summer. It's 31st July. It's past the peak of summer, and things are starting to unravel now. It's going to start picking up speed. And this is really the last time that he's fairly healthy. He's got both ears. Things are actually going quite well. His art's doing pretty well. And then at this point, things start to kind of unravel. And so it's important to sort of ask, why? Why is that happening? Okay, so let's go through that. My dear Theo, so it's 31st July, Vincent to Theo. My dear Theo, so at last our uncle's sufferings are over. I received the news this morning from my sister. It appears that they were more or less expecting you to be at the funeral, so perhaps you will indeed be there. Now, can you see you've got the patriarch has died, right? Vincent's father has died, and now their uncle has died as well. And that is sort of how long the Van Gogh brothers could have or should have lived, as far as old as their parents and or uncles and aunts and whatnot. And I mean, Vincent's only 2 years away from his own demise, his brother as well. That is why it's really important to start asking what is starting to go wrong here in terms of just pure health. Why does he struggle with his health from this point onwards? And we don't want to take wild guesses. We want to look at the letters and see what he says he's doing. And so this is his own reference to how fleeting life is. He says how short life is and how like smoke, which is no reason for despising the living. On the contrary. And you kind of get a sense of that as well when you looking at dinosaur bones and you're seeing these incredible monsters, but they're dead. And, despite their enormous teeth and so on, I stood next to a dinosaur bone that was 3 times taller than me. And then that's just the sort of femur bone. And it's like almost like a pillar of a building. These are incredible beasts, but they're mortal, right? And whatever happened to them, I guess they didn't see coming. And so makes you wonder, can we see what's coming to us, both as individuals and kind of within the true crime space as well? Do you notice the red flags in your life? And then as a species, do we notice red flags as well? Do you tune out the negative? Well, is that a very adaptive way of living, to say, okay, that information's coming in, it's making me anxious, I'm not going to think about it. For example, Lisa and I were talking a little bit about the pandemic and just talking about this idea of hoarding. You confronted with this idea of uncertainty. No one knew what was going to happen. And so, like a lot of people, you buy a certain amount of toilet paper. Is that really going to protect you from anything? And so one's got to be a bit critical about how we approach our lives. And so, he talks about life is short and fleeting like smoke. And in terms of the landscape we saw yesterday, the seasons are about to change. We spoke to an author, and well, she's not an author yet. She's busy writing a book, but someone who got quite a sophisticated understanding of the animals, writes articles for, I think it's called Wolf Magazine, and on the wildlife in Yellowstone. And she says how the animals are struggling with the environmental conditions, how the bison are somewhat not emaciated, but certainly it's right at the end of winter, and they're they need to feed on grass, kind of thing. And so you've also got big animals here that are trying to adapt and trying to figure out the environment. Yvonne says we are not good at noticing what we should, but we do try. And I think that is one aspect to art that is really important, is that I'm sure a lot of you who are here that are also in the true crime space see the overlap, that you're able to intuit things, you're able to notice little details in the art, little flourishes, little textures. That level of detail is important to apply, in the art context, in the true crime context, and also in your own life context. And some people are have got tunnel vision. They only apply that detail-oriented thing in one area of their lives, or they don't apply it at all. Someone else or something else is in control, and then you don't really notice what's happening. And I can tell you, if you an animal living in Yellowstone, you've got to pay attention to how long you think the season's going to last, because you've got to either move higher or lower down. The moose are dealing with a lot of ticks, and so there are all sorts of things that they've got to deal with. Anyway, it is so we are right to care more for the artist than for the pictures. Quite a ironic statement from Van Gogh. Is saying, you should care more about the artist than for the picture. And I must say, I think we do. I think this series has been about that, where we spend more time thinking about Van Gogh as a person, as an individual, than going gaga over his art. And, if you look at I'm not going to show it to you now, but if you look at the photos of the crowds gawking at his art in the Museum of Modern Art and the Met and the Van Gogh Museum, and wherever you see his art exhibited, how many of those people have bothered to read even a handful of his letters, right? They are gobsmacked by how valuable his art is. They're gobsmacked by, to some extent, the violence and the emotion and the unique execution, but do they really know about the person? Do they really even care about the person? And when you do care about anything, you start caring about details, and that's when the real insights come through. Okay, Renee, good to see you. Yeah, this is Easter weekend. I hope you guys are having a good Easter weekend. Anyway, he goes on to say, I'm working hard for Russell. I thought that I would do him a series of drawings after my painted studies. I believe that he will look upon them kindly, and that, at least I hope so, will help to bring him to make a deal. So just another thing to bear in mind with regard to Vincent is right now he is aware of death and mortality, right? His own uncle has died. About 2 years before that, his father died. Mauve has died. By the way, I think I told you, we saw Stephanie and John and myself saw three, I think, beautiful Anton Mauve paintings. Was it in the Met, or I think it was in the Met? So he's aware of these people dying. Excuse me, and he's actually about to die, and did that knowledge actually help him? He seemed to be forewarned. Did that knowledge actually help him? And I think it's an excellent question. I think you can argue it in several ways. Mary Williamson, good morning from the great state of Tennessee. Good morning. Good to see so many of you so early in the morning and so kind of unexpected. By the way, I'm not sure what's going on with StreamYard when I schedule a live. It won't sort of say half an hour from now. I don't know what's going on, because even if I try and sync it to the time zone that it was in, it still seems to be 6 hours out. So it's just a technological glitchy thing. So I mean, whenever I schedule a live, it's probably going to be basically nonsense. So if I say on Twitter, uh, starting in half an hour, that's the bottom line, because the scheduling clock is now out of whack, and StreamYard don't seem to have a simple way of just saying, okay, where you are, let's do that. So, well, I've set it and it hasn't really worked. It might be because I'm using a phone, a laptop, and something else. So I'm not quite sure why that's going on. We'll see if we can sort that out. But just to note, if you see a live scheduled and it's saying 6 hours from now, it's actually not. It's likely to be a lot sooner. Okay. So he's talking about some of these famous paintings, and we saw one of those executions in the Museum of Modern Art of Vincent van of the portrait of the postman. This is um, the first iteration of that. So the one that you saw in MoMA, the Museum of Modern Art, is a updated version of this, and I think a better version of this. But it's quite interesting how he describes the postman. He says, so well, let's first go through this. He says, McKnight came again yesterday to see me. That's Dodge McKnight, the American. So here I am from South Africa visiting America and looking at Dutch art in American museums. And in this story written by a Dutch artist who's living in France, you've got an American in France visiting Van Gogh. It's quite a interesting, context. So he says, and he also liked the portrait of the girl and said, besides that, he liked my garden. I really do not know if he has money or not. I'm not sure what he means by that. I think I don't know whether he wonders whether the American's going to buy his art. But that's the other picture he's talking about. I quite like that. That's not bad. I mean, I think that's much better than his portrait of Adeline Revue, which he did in the summer of 1890, 2 years later. That's much, much better. So, yeah, that's also something that's quite strange. Anyway, so then he says, I'm now at work with another model, the postman, in a blue uniform, trimmed with gold, a big bearded face, very like Socrates. Can you imagine meeting a guy like Van Gogh and he sees you through the strange artistic classical lens? I mean, what a statement to make. Oh, look at that guy, looks like Socrates. And you'd only know that if you've seen, representations of Socrates. And Stephanie and her husband and myself saw sculptures in the Met of Caesar and various other individuals. And so it's quite strange when you see that you do feel a bit of an intertextuality that Van Gogh naturally feels, where you see a lot of great art together in one place. But how do you know? I mean, it's one thing to see it in a museum where someone else has decided this is great art and this collection belongs together. But when there's no museum, how do you know what constitutes greatness? And that's what's quite amazing with Van Gogh. He knew Cézanne and Gauguin and Monet before they were really, well, certainly before they were world famous. And that's quite incredible. Okay, so let's continue. Nice having a couple of you here. At one point, I thought I was going to be chatting to nobody, but it's good to have already 17 of you in chat. Right now, it's 8:20 in the morning here in Big Sky. Um, still pretty cold though. A lot of the skiers go out very early to be the first out onto the slopes. Okay, so he goes on to say he calls the postman a violent Republican like Tanguy. Not quite sure what that means, but then he says a man more interesting than most. Obviously, I don't think he means Republican in the American sense. Actually, not quite sure what to make of that. Um, I guess it could mean that he's very patriotic, the postman. But of course, the postman features in the somewhat fictional, somewhat factual Loving Vincent. And so there definitely was a relationship between, uh, a friendship between the two of them. And you can imagine how many letters the postman had to deliver to this one individual. I mean, he probably got more letters delivered to Vincent than anyone else, right? Okay, so he says, if we prod Russell, perhaps he will take the Gorgon that you bought. And if there's no other way of helping Gorgon, what should be done? So, do you notice how long this struggle with Gorgon is going on? It's just without end. And the struggle would continue and, in a way, only get worse. Anyway, he goes on to say, when I write him, send the drawings, it will, of course, be to urge him to make up his mind. And that is a very good way of putting it. That he can't seem to make up his mind, that he's doing what suits him. He seems to be, in a way, a selfish individual. Then he says, I shall say to him, look here, you all like our picture, but I believe that we shall see still better work from the artist. Why don't you do as we do, who have faith in the whole man such as he is, and admire everything he does? Then I want to add that certainly it is all one to us to give up the big picture if necessary. Let me read that again. Then I want to add that certainly it is all one to us to give up the big picture if necessary. But since Gauguin will always be in want of money, it is in his interest that we do not keep it until his prices have trebled or quadrupled, a thing which we believe will happen. So they've clearly got confident, they've clearly got confidence in Gauguin's talent. And that actually wasn't misplaced either. They're expecting his art to treble and quadruple. And of course, Van Gogh's will do the same, right? In the fullness of time. Anyway, he goes on to say, if after this Russell likes to make a real definite offer, my word, we shall see. And Gauguin, in this case, must say that if he sold it to you as a friend at such a price, he's determined that it should not be sold to another collector at that same price. Anyway, let's finish the drawings. I have 8 and shall do 12, and let's wait to hear what he says. I'm very curious to know whether or not you have been able to go to Holland. I shall not write any more for the moment. The change I'm going to try to make in my paintings is to do more figures. So, do you remember I said, or I asked in the poll, what do you think changes that propels Van Gogh into a downward spiral? Well, yeah, you are seeing a change in strategy from him. Bear in mind, he told us he's lonely. He tells us that all day only has like a little conversation when he orders breakfast, sort of with a waiter, and that's about all. He doesn't really talk to anyone. He's out in the field all day, and he's been waiting for Gauguin to join him, but Gauguin can't make up his mind. Um, has Mary just joined us? I know, Mary, you've been here a while, but Mary says Happy Easter. Okay, so Do you follow my reasoning? Is that he starts going downhill because of something? Well, one of the things that's going on now is now going to start painting figures more. And what do you think that means? Means he's going to be a lot of the women that he paints seem to be prostitutes, and so he's going to be painting them and I guess sleeping with them. And what impact is that going to have on his health? See what you guys are saying. Josie, good to see you. Happy Easter. Renee, where's your farm? S.M. Kowalinsky says he had the artistic vision which allowed him to see the scope and depth of Gauguin's work. Yeah. Is it Arkansas? Okay. So can you see that is the main reason why he's going to he's going to be start to indulge, and a part of it I think is due to loneliness. He may also just be bored with painting landscapes all the time. But this is a significant shift, and it's not going to be good for him. And you can imagine if he's womanizing, he's also going to be drinking. Anyway, it says altogether. So you kind of get the idea that when he paints the postman's portrait and when he paints this other Arlesienne, that sort of whets his appetite for painting, women of the night and whatnot. He kind of gets activated and triggered and maybe even aroused by this idea of that he can what do they call it? Kind of have a captive audience for a certain amount of time. And bear in mind, he's desperately lonely, so it's something that soothes him in a social sense, because if you're lonely, there's a sense of inner agitation, and you feel unfulfilled and sort of restless in that sense. But then there's also the other aspects, Anyway, it goes on to say, altogether, it is the only thing in painting that excites me to the depths of my soul. I'm sure it excites him in other ways as well, but he says, which makes me feel the infinite more than anything else. The 17th of this month, my friend, the second lieutenant of Zouaves, is going to Paris. That's one of those soldiers, French soldiers. He offered to take charge of the parcel I have for you, and I think I shall accept. In this way, you will get it on the 18th without having to pay carriage. Just kind of trying to find ways to save on little expenses like post and packaging, I guess. Just having a friend deliver some of Van Gogh's work, I guess, to his brother as a freebie, I suppose. Yeah, he's saying he likes painting people. Then he says, I'm writing our sister today. Their grief will be great. Did Bernard's sketches reach you? As our sister said, from the moment people are gone, you remember only their good moments and their good qualities. But the great thing is to try to see these while they are still with us. And I mean, that is such a poignant statement from Van Gogh because no one really appreciated him for who he was, right? It would be so simple and would account so much for the terrible things in life which now amaze and wound us so. If life had yet another hemisphere, invisible it is true, but where one lands when one dies. To those who make this interesting and solemn journey, our best wishes and sympathy. I think that's a great title for this episode. The great thing is to try to see the good moments and good qualities in people while they're still with us. Do you agree with that? I'm going to quickly change it. Just give me a second. Bridget says, I just read that Sarah, something that could definitely be true. What's that? So what does it say? The great thing is to try to see these uh, people's good moments and good qualities while they're alive. Sorry about this. Almost done. Just trying to fit it into the. You've only got 100 characters allowed in your title. Okay, there we go. Okay. What is. Okay, so let's continue. Right, so it says, if you go to Holland, many kind messages from me to our mother and sister. With a handshake, ever yours, Vincent. And then he adds quite a long postscript. He says, this week will be pretty tough because of my having to pay the rent and the model. So, yeah, he's starting to spend money on you know what. And he says, I hope to do these sketches after the studies for you as well. You will see that there's something of a Japanese air. I must thank you again for yesterday's 50 franc note and answer your letter. He's just gotten 50 francs. Guess what he's going to be doing with it? It was a good thing to send the paints and canvases as my stock was exhausted all along the line. About Bing, as for being in a hurry, no, but far from breaking off relations with him, we must have another deposit of pictures as soon as we can settle up. I saw a magnificent and strange effect this evening. So I always appreciate it when he does this because you get a glimpse into what he's seeing and what, what is kind of going on in his life. And he says, a very big boat loaded with coal on the Rhone moored to the quay. Right? This is in terms of all. And I must say, when I walked to and from and near the Yellow House, the Rhone is right next door, and there are big barges and sort of tourist boats and so on. There are big boats right there, and they're moored right there. He says, seen from above, it was all shining and wet with a shower. It must have rained. The water was yellowish white and clouded pearl grey. The sky lilac with an orange streak in the west, the town violet. On the boat, some poor workmen in dirty blue and white came and went, carrying the cargo on shore. It was pure hokusai. In other words, it evoked a Japanese picture. Yeah, I think it was sort of all three. I think he needed company. I think he needed intimacy. I think he needed satiation, right? Tomorrow, good to see you. So he goes on to say, on the boat, some poor workman in dirty. He says, It was too late to do it, to paint it, but one day when that coal boat comes back, I must give it a try. I saw it in a railway coal yard, the spot I've just found, and where there will be plenty of other things to do. With a handshake, because if I want to ride to Holland too, I must make haste. I shall have difficulty getting through this week, but I hope to get the series of figures going. Okay, so this is kind of what is going to propel him down. His health is going to suffer as a result of this. So here's his letter to his sister, Philomena van Gogh. Dear sister, I will answer your letter of this morning without delay. I shall probably hear from Paris by tomorrow what Theo is going to do, whether he'll be able to get away. I don't doubt that he will go to you if he can. It is not always admirable for a person one knows to set out on the great journey to that other hemisphere of life whose existence we only surmise. But it goes without saying that my best wishes are with today's traveler. I'm working very hard now, and I think the summer here extremely beautiful, more beautiful than I ever saw it in the north. It's quite a statement, right? I can say the same about the winter that I saw, or the winter scenes, the snowscapes that I saw in Yellowstone. Um, those were some of the most beautiful winter scenes I've ever seen. Mountains stretching as far as you can see, mountain wilderness stretching as far as you can see. I posted a couple of them on to Instagram, and I actually want to send them to my brother and recommend to him that he paint some of those landscapes and see if there's a market, an American market for them. Because he mostly paints South African landscapes. He has actually sold art to, to Americans. So we'll see what he says. But I mean, that's one of the amazing things with travel. You go somewhere and you may see something more beautiful than you've ever seen, and it makes you realize what exists in the world. They're totally different animals. I mean, I think the biggest animal in North America is the bison, but it's actually a small animal compared to the giants in Africa, the elephants, the giraffes, the rhinos, the eland. Um, I think our wildebeest are maybe not quite as big as bison, but very similar. Okay, so he goes on to say, people here are complaining loudly that it is not the same as usual. Now and then some rain in the morning or the afternoon, but infinitely less than in our country. So he's saying there's far less rain in the south of France than in the Netherlands. The harvest was gathered long ago. There's much wind here, right? There's always wind, but he says here, however, a very ill-natured whining wind, le mistral, very troublesome for the most part, when I have to paint in it, in which case I put my canvas down flat on the ground and work on my knees, for the easel does not stand firm. So you can see that maybe an important reason why is wanting to paint models is because he sort of had it with this wind, that he's been losing the battle against the Mistral. And so much so that he can't actually even paint, with the easel upright. Then he says, I have a study of a garden 1 meter wide, poppies and other red flowers surrounded by green in the foreground and a square of bluebells. Then a bed of orange and yellow Africans. I think he means African violets. Then white and yellow flowers or African daisies, maybe. And at last, in the background, pink and lilac. Also dark violet scabriosas and red geraniums and sunflowers and a fig tree and an oleander and a vine. And in the distance, black cypresses against low white houses. So that's a reference to this picture. Look at all that color. So he's painting abundance even though he's not really feeling it. Right? He talks about In the distance, black cypresses against low white houses with orange roofs and a delicate green-blue streak of sky. Oh, I know very well that not a single flower is drawn completely, that there are more dabs of color, red, yellow, orange, green, blue, violet, but the impression of all these colors in their juxtaposition is there all right, in the painting as in nature, right? So he's trying to kind of be an impressionist, right? Mary says, I oil paint. We should maybe send us, share some of your pictures. By the way, Yvonne, I've seen your photos. I'll try and put them up on Team Peachtree when I can. Mary says his brushstrokes are fascinating. Yes, they are. They're totally different to Gauguin's. Totally different. Then he says, I suppose you would be disappointed, and I think it unbeautiful if you saw it. Oh, and you might think it unbeautiful. What a strange word. But you see that the subject is rather summary. Uncle Cor has seen work of mine more than once, and he thinks it execrable. I don't know if that's a strange derivation of excrement, but I don't think it's I don't think it's very positive. Let's see if we can quickly look that up. Is it execrable? Means extremely bad or unpleasant, appalling, awful, dreadful, terrible, frightful, atrocious, very bad. In other words, Uncle Cor thinks his nephew's work is crap. You know, that's maybe a simpler word. Anyway, he says, I'm now engaged on a portrait of a postman in his dark blue uniform with yellow. Ahead, he says again, somewhat like Socrates, hardly any nose at all. A high forehead, bald crown, little grey eyes, bright red chubby cheeks, a big pepper and salt beard, large ears. I must say that description really does give you a sense of him in a way even better than the actual artwork. It's quite strange. He says he's got almost no nose. Okay, so he goes on to say, the man is an ardent Republican and socialist, reasons quite well and knows a lot of things. His wife was delivered of a child today, and he's consequently feeling as proud as a peacock, and is all aglow with satisfaction. Maybe that's why the postman actually sat for the portrait, because of this milestone in his life, right? Josie says she's got a new appreciation for Starry Night. That's good to hear. Okay. In point of fact, I greatly prefer painting a thing like this to doing pictures of flowers. But since this can be done without ignoring the other, I am taking advantage of the opportunities as they come. Okay. I also have a portrait of a 12-year-old girl, brown eyes, black hair and eyebrows, yellowish matte complexion. She's sitting in a cane chair, a blood red and violet striped bodice, a deep blue skirt with little orange dots, a branch of oleander in her hand, the background light green, nearly white. You may remember, so there she's holding a branch of oleander. You may remember in the portrait of Dr. Geshe, he also has his hand close to foxgloves, right? Okay. It's quite a long letter, this. He says, I'm always looking for the same thing, a portrait, a landscape, and a portrait. I should also get to paint the baby born today. At least I hope so. I'm not sure if he actually did. I've also got a garden without flowers, that is to say, a lawn, newly mown, bright green, with the grey haze spread in long streaks. A weeping ash and a number of cedars and cypresses. The cedars yellowish and spherical in form, the cypresses rising high into the air, blue-green. So that's a reference to this picture. I don't like this one very much, to be honest. At the back, oleander and a patch of green blue sky. The blue shadows of the shrubs on the grass. Also a portrait bust of a Zouave, in a blue uniform with red and yellow trimmings. So that's a reference to this picture. Not too bad. Okay, and then he says, now as regards what you ask as to whether it is hot here and whether I'm going to live with somebody else. So can you see his sister's asking him, what's going on? Weren't you going to live with another artist? What's going on in terms of your domestic situation? So he says, well, this is rather probably, what? Well, this rather probably, and with a very clever painter too, who, like the other Impressionists, is leading a life full of cares, and who is the proud owner of a liver complaint besides. Some time ago, Theo bought a large picture from him portraying negresses, and that's this picture. Trying to think whether we saw this picture in New York. I don't think we did. Stephanie, did we see this picture? Anyway, then he says, like Le Mariage de Loti, that description of Otaheite. The fact is that he has been in Martinique and has painted amid the tropical scenery there. We have a second painting of his beside. So Theo actually owns 2 Gauguins, and these will become priceless eventually. He says, which he exchanged for one of my studies, and this is the other one. I don't think I saw this either. I took photos of the Paul Gauguins. I'll show them to you when I've got a bit more time. SW Firefly says she's just lurking. Good to see you here. Okay, so he goes on to say, he's a fellow who works like one possessed, and he does all sorts of things. He is in Brittany at the moment. He does do all sorts of things. He's a fencer, he's a pugilist, which is someone who likes boxing. He's quite a athletic fellow. He's got family who apparently got some sort of royal heritage going back to Peru. But he's also a scoundrel. He's abandoned his family and he's quite a hedonist. Anyway, he writes, we shall probably go live together for the sake of economy. So that's how Van Gogh sees it. Right, it's for the sake of economy, but obviously Van Gogh will, because he's so lonely, he will develop this sort of unusual, unhealthy attachment. He's going to chew off Gauguin's ear when Gauguin arrives, because that's where he said, and to give each other company. I don't really think Gauguin wants Vincent's company in particular, but I think Vincent wants Gauguin, certainly. He will come here if he or I can sell something of these. He will come here if he, let me read that again. He will come here if he or I can sell something of these days. Sorry, I'm not getting it right. Make this text a bit smaller. Okay, let's try final time. Okay, he will come here if he or I can sell something one of these days so that he can pay for his journey. It is not impossible that some obstacle will crop up. Yeah, well, that's certainly true. But on the whole, it is quite probable that it will happen. In other words, that he will hitch up, that he will, um, you know, stay with him. And even if it should not happen, and I to go on working alone, yet working in the same direction as the other fellows, although every one of them maintains his own style, brings about something of a comradeship, and at times leads to an interesting correspondence. So Van Gogh seems to be aware that something is brewing amongst his peers and with himself. So now it's really interesting. Now he's going to talk about his own health. He's going to reflect on his health, which is really important to keep track of, to take note of. Stephanie H, welcome. Happy Easter. Thanks for joining us. Silent Murmur says, Timmy is more safe with Nick than whoever he's with right now. Yeah, Timmy's apparently not doing terribly great. I don't know, just hearing that he's not, doesn't seem to be too happy. But he has been chasing cats, which I think maybe is good. He's being taken for walks, but I think he'll be okay. I have been seeing dogs all over the place. I go to airports and there's but these are service dogs. Um, so just to quickly divert from what you're talking about, I think I'm not going to read a letter after this. So I think we're going to end this live maybe in the next 10, 15 minutes. But yeah, so at the Denver airport, I saw 2 or 3 dogs in like a outside court area, and I actually spoke to people about how it all works because I'd love to bring my dog with, and quite a few people have got their dogs here at Big Sky. I wonder what my dog would make of the snow. I think it would be quite funny. Um, apparently, and some of you may know this, apparently, um, you could have a service dog if you needed a dog for your emotions. So if you're suffering from anxiety, and apparently this was so popular that everyone started doing it. Everyone started, and I mean, technically, I could say the same thing. I don't want to be. I want my dog as a kind of a companion, or yeah, emotional support. But anyway, so in America, they made provision for that sort of thing, and then became so popular. I guess there were, you like go to an airport and there'd be like every second person's got a dog with them, and so it became too popular, and they had to limit that. But Lisa, who's also got a dog, said she would never put her dog in a cargo hold. You never know how cold or hot it's going to get in there, and so on. Yeah, Timmy would love the snow. Mel Stiller, good to see you. Sarah says, I'm a therapist and have done the paperwork for many people to travel with their dog. Sarah, I think you must contact me. Sarah, are you on Instagram? If you are, please contact me on Instagram. Sounds good. By the way, do you guys like my shirt? I said to Lisa was with me when I bought it. I said to her, I'm not really sure if I should buy pink. And she said, no, no, that's not pink, it's coral. What do you guys think? Can you see the window behind me sort of lighting up? I think I'll show you the view out the window when I'm about to sign off. Okay. Let's quickly finish off with this letter. So he says, how is your health? He's asking his sister Wilhelmine. How is your health? Good, I hope. Above all, you should try to get into the country as much as possible. Again, he's really recommending the countryside as a sort of elixir, as a sort of a health, something to stimulate health. And then here he says, "Here I am afflicted now and then with an inability to eat." So I suppose you could say he was suffering from a kind of I can't think of the word now. If you suffer from what's that word for thanks, Gwen. What's that word for if you often have it with young girls, anorexia. Do you think that he's got a kind of anorexia? Silent Murmur says if he brings Timmy on a plane, he couldn't sit with Nick, and sedating animals is a risk. Now, apparently, a service dog sits at your feet. Thanks, Mel. Thank you. Anyway, so he goes on to say he's not eating much, and you can see how that is not going to be very sustainable. That's not good for health. Anorexia nervosa, right? He says something of the sort you suffered from at the time, but on the whole, I managed to steer clear of the rocks. When your body forsakes you, use your brains. You and I, with our constitution, should take this to heart. For that matter, work, if we are making headway, can help a lot. Can you see how he is healthy when he's working? And so again, in the last summer, 1890, how could he have been depressed and in despair if he was working as much as he was? But his body is going to start forsaking him. If he's going to start sleeping around, I think he's already got syphilis. It's just going to kind of be aggravated. And of course, if he gets syphilis, if the syphilis kind of develops at the beginning of autumn kind of thing, then it's only going to get worse in the winter when he's not going to get exercise or sunshine or whatever. Renee said, I'd be scared Timmy might get sick from something here in the USA. Maybe. He doesn't have bulimia. He's just struggling to eat. Anyway, he says, I think it's exquisitely beautiful here in summer. The green is very deep and rich. The air is thin and astonishingly clear. Well, you should try South Africa or Yellowstone for that matter. But for all the wide plain, but for all that, the wide plain might often remind me very strongly of the Dutch scenery, here where there are hardly any mountains or rocks, if the color were not so different. So just finding the light, the color, the sunshine, the lack of rain, the warmth, invigorating. It says, what pleases me very much is the gaily colored clothes, the women and girls dressed in cheap, simple material, but with green, red, and pink, Havana yellow, violet, or blue stripes, or dots of the same colors, white scarves, red, green, and yellow parasols, a vigorous sun, like sulfur, shining on it all. The great blue sky, sometimes it is as enormously gay as Holland is gloomy. So he's also just being totally invigorated by a landscape that is so different, it's like another world. And I've certainly experienced that very much so during my first couple of days in America. The cityscapes of Manhattan compared to the snowscapes of Yellowstone, what a contrast. Both awesome in their own ways. One is a vertical landscape, the other is a horizontal landscape. One is towering black, silver, and gray, and glass. The other white, endless white. When Stephanie and John and I were on the what's it called? I think it's called the Edge, One Vanderbilt, one of the tallest buildings in Manhattan. you had this incredible scene where it's like a galaxy. You just see these structures with lots of little, tens of thousands of tiny yellow squares, right? You kind of feel like you on Coruscant in Star Wars, or just looking at this galaxy. But basically, what you're seeing is a lot of black with 10 or 20% of it is light, which is still quite a lot. Whereas on a snowscape, it's the opposite. It's an inversion of that. It's all white with a lot of black trees and rocks and sometimes animals, right? It's a totally inverted landscape in terms of just that aspect. Quite interesting. Okay, so he goes on to say, what a pity that not everybody has these two extremes. Now I must stop. Uncle's death is a big event for you and mother, and particularly for our aunt. And you know what's really bizarre here is he's spoken far more in this letter and the previous letter than he ever spoke about his own father's death. It's actually bizarre. He virtually never acknowledges his own father's death in his own letters. You kind of get the feeling there's some kind of wound there, right? Yeah, both amazing in their own ways. That's true. Okay, so he goes on to say, the impression it makes on me is very strange because in my mind there's an image of the man made up of memories of so long ago, of a great many years ago. And I think it's so peculiar that a man one once knew at such close range should have become such a stranger. I suppose you will be able to understand this. Looked at from this point of view, life is so much like a dream. And from the moment things are simplified again, the sick man undertakes his great journey. One understands it better. And there's a certain fact that my feelings about it are similar to yours. Theo and I feel it very much too. He has had much more intercourse that's correspondence with Uncle than I. By the way, if you want to read this letter on your own steam, you can get it at this link. He goes on to say, one understands it better, and it is a certain fact that my feelings about it are similar to yours. Theo will feel it very much too. He has had much more. Okay, so I read that. How is mother these days? I often think of you both, and it is from the bottom of my heart that I give you my best wishes. Vincent. Then he says, I'm up to my ears in work, and it happens so seldom that I have anything else in mind. It's quite an ironic statement. I'm up to my ears in work. Well, a little bit later, you'll only be able to say, I'm up to my ear in work. Try not to laugh at that. Then he says, if you can manage it, don't lose sight of those books and prints of mine that I wrote you about. Okay, so that is that letter, and that is it for July. I think that was the last letter of July, or is there one more? Um, is there one more? Okay. So we're gonna pick up the narrative in August in Van Gogh Letters number 52. We are going a little bit slower now because I'm not going to be doing 2 3 hour lives. This is already an hour and 15 minutes. I think I'm going to end here. I hope you found this worthwhile. Do you guys want to have a look around my hotel room? You guys want to check out what's happening? Okay. You can see the light over my shoulders now getting quite bright. It's um, my computers say 9 o'clock in the morning, but I think those are set to New York time. Is it 9 o'clock in New York? Um, over here it is 7 o'clock. So I think that actually sounds right. Okay, virtual tour. Let's do this. I'm just scared if I do this, something bad's going to happen. Let's see. What happens if I do this? Nothing. Okay, good. So let me show you. So this is the TV. This is the view outside. Pretty damn cold. Can you see the mountain just beside the building that's called Lone Peak or Lone Mountain, something like that? Anyway, can you see all the snow? Sun's coming up over there. There's a raven up there. It's cold out there. And that's my system. And yeah, this is my bedroom. Quite nice. There's a moose up there. I haven't actually unpacked. And this is the view through. So there you go, a little bit of a behind the scenes. How do I know it's a raven? Because not sure how to answer that. Because we saw them at Yellowstone, and our guide also confirmed that it was a raven. So, guess does that answer your question? Okay, last couple of comments. Yes, I am in Montana. I'm in Big Sky. Suppose it could be a North American crow. Okay, that's it from me. Thanks a lot for joining me. I hope you guys have a wonderful Easter. Enjoy time with your family, friends, whatever you're doing. I'll be back with episode 52. I'll try and do it sort of every second or third day, but as I say, keeping it to about an hour. I'm also going to try and do a very brief TCRS update just on what's been happening, just 10-20 minutes. So I might do that after this. So if you're around, please check that out. Thanks a lot for joining me. And I'll see you guys next time. Keep warm. And if you're anywhere near this area, yeah, you can definitely keep warm. Okay, take care. Again, enjoy your weekend. Thanks a lot for joining me, guys. Lisa also sends her regards. Ciao.